I'm gonna try not to laugh and smile. I can't help it. I'm gonna laugh and smile. I want to ask you if you're afraid.
You do look pretty creepy.
I know. This is what I usually do. This is my usual Sunday. I usually do this. Just in the dark with a flashlight. Okay, I'm gonna turn around. I'm gonna ask you if you're afraid. Okay?
You just sit in the window and wait for someone to go by so you can
So I can do
test
that.
their fear response.
Ready?
Yeah.
Tell me, Ryan. Are you afraid?
Of you, no.
Okay, well, that's this week's theme is fear, and last week's theme was beginnings, and so today we're talking about fear, and we're going to be talking about fear in terms of our relationship to it and the way some ways in which we engage in it. Go ahead.
I'm totally distracted by. I'm trying to decide what evil character from a horror movie that you remind me of more. I'm kind of stuck between Despicable Me and others.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a compliment.
We are recording now. Yes, we are.
we are recording. Okay, hold on. Let me get this thing. Ow! I'll mute myself for a moment.
I thought that was a bit of a testing intro, but it looks like you just want to keep going with this, eh?
I want to keep going with it. I thought it was really cool, and I come off really cool, so I think we should keep it.
Okay, well, I'm rooting for you.
Okay, turning on.
Okay.
What was that? I heard something. I feel like we have to
Talking-
start over.
No, let's keep going. This is so good so far. How
So
can
good
we
so
dump?
far.
How can we dump on this? It's so perfect so far.
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit of fear right now because I'm feeling a little bit lost.
Let me guide you back to. I know I threw you off because I did that scary character, and now you're feeling very scared. You don't know what to do with yourself, but everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's us. It's me.
Mm-hmm.
You know me. I'm not a monster. I'm okay. You're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about fear. And in particular, our relationship with our favorite movie that makes us scared. And you have yours and I have mine. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So because we're talking about the phenomenon of fear, and in this course we're using different forms of media, and for this podcast we decided to look at movies, and particularly horror movies, because we both really love horror movies, and we've each actually thought of a film that's had a long-standing and very specific impact on us in our relationship to fear. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, horror movies. Yay, I'm so happy. Love horror movies. Can't get enough of them.
Okay.
So I think it's a good idea. It's like, as we were like thinking about this course, it's like really wanting to focus on when we look at phenomena, that there's like a common understanding of a theme, and then there's the subjective understanding of a theme. So a common understanding of fear, we can be talking about it, looking at some science-based stuff about how our bodies are designed to respond to threats to us in our immediate environment, right? So there's the nervous system response, where something comes into our awareness that we need to flee or fight, any of those responses that we've got. And there's different ways that can be produced in our body: sweaty hands, heightened senses of what's going on around us, heart palpitations, different functions happening with different organs in our body, our hair standing up on end, experiences that we might be feeling in our ears, in our mouths. Some people can say that they can taste like a metallic taste in their mouth when they're feeling a sense of fear of something around them. So there's all that we can get into in more detail. But I'm more curious for us to be talking about our subjective understanding of fear. And how we've actually thought about how to do that is by each of us talking a little bit about a relationship that we have to a specific film, and how we relate to fear through that film. So, Pablo, what film did you choose that actually shows your long-standing relationship with fear that you can talk about?
I chose Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, based on the novel by Stephen King.
Classic,
Very
classic,
classic.
classic horror movie.
And I
Okay.
think you also chose a very classic movie as well. What was that?
Yes, yes, I chose a classic movie too. I chose Jaws, the original Jaws film, about a very angry shark, apparently, and lots
That's
of
what it's about? That's a
very angry
synopsis?
shark.
Very angry shark.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Enough said.
Um,
I think we've spoken enough about our favorite movies. No,
so,
tell me more. Tell me about Jaws.
So for each of us, the film that we chose, we actually have a relationship with that film from when we were young children and have continued having a relationship with that film up until present day. So you last night actually watched The Shining again for yourself. I can't remember the last time I watched Jaws, but it was definitely within the last month. It seems to be a film that I watch every couple of months or whatever to stay connected to it because it's such a pleasurable experience for me. But I'm curious to hear from you, Pablo, your first experience with The Shining. So give us a story about how you first came in contact with that film.
I found a box of books that my dad had. He I think he was into like Robert Heinlein, you know, that sci-fi author. Anyways, in this book, there was a couple of Stephen King books. It was the Bachman books, which are really great stories, like The Long Walk and stuff like that. But there was also The Shining, and I grabbed that because we are going to go on a camping trip, and it's probably the worst choice that I could have made to go on a camping trip and read this book as an 8-year-old. And on the car ride up and everything, and the tension in that car and with my family, and the tension of that camping trip. There's always a little bit of tension when we get together, when the Gonzaleses get together.
Dad,
Yes?
I'm hungry.
Well, you should have eaten your breakfast.
The tension within familial relationships. And so I was reading it and being scared. And there's also like ghosts and psychic phenomenon. There's all of these things happening in the story. And then I watched a couple of years later the movie by Stanley Kubrick based on the book. And I found the movie to be just terrifying from beginning to end. Terrifying.
Come play
And how
with
did
us,
you
Daddy.
recognize it to be terrifying? What were you experiencing that let you know that you were scared?
I couldn't have been further dug into that couch that I was on. I saw it at my cousin's house in the basement. I was about 10 years old, and I felt like I needed to, almost like I was being repelled away from the television. Like I couldn't get far enough away in that couch. Like just trying to snuggle into that couch, and I felt my heart pounding. My hands were sweating. Sometimes I couldn't look at the screen. Sometimes I had to cover my ears. Yeah, it was like a really visceral response to that movie. And something kept bringing me back to it. I watched it again many, many years later as a teenager, and I had a different experience with it then. I was more interested in the technical aspects of it. I was getting really into film, and I was studying that in high school, and really appreciating the artistry of something like the Stanley Kubrick.
Okay.
And now as an adult, and in the past several years, appreciating it on a different level of like, it is a story about families, and it's a story about the terror that can occur within families. And I connect to it on a psychological level with similar feelings of fear sometimes. But I guess my relationship with fear has evolved over time. And my relationship to watching scary things. I don't feel the need now to cover my eyes and ears anymore. I actually want to see and hear things. I want to feel that fear, but I feel more in control now. I feel more empowered to be able to do that. And I want to talk about how I came to that and some of the differences in my life now than when I was a kid. But first, tell me about your first experience with your movie.
So my first experience with Jaws was at the drive-in when I was very young. I was under the age of 5 when I saw it. So my family went to the drive-in quite often. That was our kind of our recreational thing to do. So my sisters and I, who are a couple of years older than me, all of us piled into the car in our pajamas, went to the drive-in, and Jaws was the second film to play of the night. So when most kids were supposed to be asleep in the cars, I was very much awake and fascinated by seeing this thing that I wasn't supposed to see. And as soon as the film started and the music began, the music got me first. I immediately became nervous in my body because I hadn't heard music like that before. And it really drew my attention that something was happening. And seeing on the screen the opening credits of the film, the camera's going through the seaweed deep in the water. It's murky. It's from a point of view, but we don't know what point of view we're looking from. I also didn't have any idea what this movie was. I didn't know it was about a shark or anything. All I knew is that deep in the water, something wasn't right. And I felt so scared that I was there at the bottom of the water, in the bottom of the ocean, in all this dark seaweed with this scary music, totally alone, very isolated in that space. The shark happened, all the other stuff happened in the movie, really, really scary. I walked away from that film being very afraid of dark water, deep water, everything had sharks in it. And that fear followed me. But I became fascinated with the film. It took me some years later to watch it again. I still had a very fearful response, wanting to get out of the room, wanting to kind of hide from the scenes that were very, very graphic. But then as I also myself, like being a teenager and then coming into adulthood, developing a different relationship and appreciating things in the film as well, where I wasn't that little kid stuck in the back of the car, that my relationship with the fear in that film changed as a result of me having choice as to how I engaged with the film and what I was actually paying attention to. And that included paying attention to myself and understanding what I was feeling.
That's cool. So that's one of the differences. Is that
Sure.
Yeah, it wasn't just the movie itself, but it was like you were kind of now examining yourself and how you're feeling as you were watching it. Instead of just having this experience, you could examine it.
Yeah. So the film itself has been this wonderful story to follow from a very young age and being so incredibly innocent in this situation that I had no idea what I was in. Very, very afraid, very alone, and then having this progression of this story with this film to where I am now as an adult and understanding who I was then and the fear response of not having any support around me and being so utterly alone in that moment, in that fear, and not knowing what I could possibly access for support. Didn't even understand that support was a thing that I could have, to the relationship I have with the film now, where I love to be scared. I love to be in that moment with that movie and any scary movie, because it gives me an opportunity to actually understand what's happening in my body and the choices that I do have. And being reminded through horror and fearful things like that, being reminded of the supports that I do have and the supports that I do want and that I can reach out for to not feel alone.
So that's similar to your experience, coming back to that scary movie for me now as an adult, and I have a better understanding of what support looks like for myself. So when I'm watching it with a friend, or being able to pause the movie or watching it during the day instead of at night, and like having some autonomy around the context in which I'm going to watch it, but also just, knowing that I can check in with myself, that I have some control over that, or at least some awareness of what I'm actually feeling and experiencing, which I didn't have as a child. I just felt like things were happening to me. And now it's like I have some control over, I can allow some things in and kind of push other things away if I need to or want to. And even today when I hear the word support, sometimes I'm not exactly sure what people mean by that. And support to me now has so many meanings, and it can just be pausing a movie is a support, or talking about the film afterwards and unpacking my feelings about it is a support. I just want to tie it back to our previous podcast about beginnings and how I had an experience of fear about that, and the night before feeling very anxious and falling asleep around 4:00 in the morning finally, and then waking up with stomach cramps because it was the first day of class. Did you have any fear around the course in that way?
I did. I also didn't get the best night's sleep beforehand. I was going through things in my head and going into that fear response I have of like trying to be overly prepared for every possible scenario, which in hindsight, I realize isn't that supportive to myself. That I was not trusting myself as much as I could have and I should have, because we're not here by accident. We're here for a reason. We have our own understanding and knowledge to share, and also like the keenness to be learning more from other people as well. But yes, I was also didn't have the best night's sleep. Also woke up feeling some worries in my body that something was going to go horribly wrong and we weren't going to be able to deal with it, and getting a little bit catastrophic in my thinking about some things.
What was then? Well, how did you do it, and how did you work? Okay, so let's just say, and I think we've talked about this before. A couple of years ago, I would not be caught dead standing in front of a group of people saying anything.
Mhm.
Just a couple of years ago, I could not have imagined being in that position, and I wouldn't have wanted to imagine it. And how about you?
Yeah, most of my life I've had a fear of public speaking. Never wanted to be the center of attention where everyone was focused on what I had to say. That felt unbelievable to me. So in anticipation of this course, and we've both been teaching classes, we've both had quite a bit of experience up to this point of teaching, but this felt very different. This was bringing up a different sense of fear for me, because for me, it was the first moment of having something that I developed, but also developed with somebody else. So it wasn't just the fear of me having to be in front of this new group of people who needed to understand what this was about. Also, the fear was that I was counting on you and you were counting on me to be there for support for one another, and the fear of not getting it right in some way that could feel like a loss for you or to let you down in some way.
Oh, wow.
So that was also a fear that I was experiencing.
That's so funny that we can have. So we're talking about the same thing. You and I are both co-teaching this course, but my fears were different than yours, because my fears, I'm not afraid about letting you down because I'm not afraid about letting me down. I really do believe at this point that it's going to be an experience. It's going to be what it is. And if some people are disappointed by that or excited by that or think it's great or not great or or would have done it differently, all of that is fine for me. I'm okay with that. Yeah, that's so interesting that we can have such different thoughts about it.
And we wouldn't know if we weren't talking about it. If we weren't having this conversation right now and being curious about what fear means to us, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So we wouldn't know these things about each other. So just now having this moment to talk about our fears and to realize that we had different things that were impacting us, different reasons behind our fears,
Mm-hmm.
that now we can even access more support by knowing that about one another. And feeling the support, just knowing that I could say that to you and you're like, oh, I didn't know that thing, and now I know something more. It's like, it feels like, oh, okay, I could share this thing, and it wasn't devastating. It wasn't met with, why would you feel that way? What's going on with you? Like,
Right.
That's pretty great. That's pretty
Actually,
great.
I was actually very moved by that. Like, I think that that's so nice that you were considering me as part of this fear. Like, you didn't want me to be upset or disappointed by it. That was one of your fears. Thank you so much for including me in your fears. I appreciate it.
You got it. And so here we are talking about like our fears before starting this class and what it means for us. And it keeps coming back to the idea that we had for developing this course, and we're doing it right now, is how much support matters to us and
Mm-hmm.
what support looks like when we notice it and when we don't notice it. And that what you and I are both needing and looking for is to hear one another, to hear our perspectives, and to get more understanding of this thing so that we feel less isolated, possibly better understood, more heard, to further develop our understanding of ourselves and the work that we're doing, and hoping that that can actually move into this classroom with this group of folks and more folks moving forward, to be able to talk more and have more conversations about these things. That's how we understand and experience them in ourselves and in our bodies, and relating them to one another to feel that common understanding of something.
So between you and I, it sounds like our common understanding about support in terms of fear is communication. That's a key thing, to be able to feel like somebody understands us and to understand somebody else's experience. And I think that's kind of built into our course, or we're trying to build that in. But when I think about media and the media that we consume, that's also what I'm feeling from those things. That's what I get from them, support. Like watching The Shining now as an adult, I get the support of knowing that there was an artist back in the 80s who created this piece of work, who knew what it was like to be a scared kid and wanted to put that out there in a very visceral and cinematic way. And I related to that. Even when I was a kid, I didn't know that that was happening, but I did. I was relating to what he was putting down and felt understood. And now as an adult, I definitely get that from that. I feel understood by watching that movie. So that's another form of communication. Is I think a student told me this a couple of semesters ago, this term parasocial. Parasocial. My parasocial relationship with Stanley Kubrick. So like he created something for millions of people, but he created it just for me. And I have such a relationship with that movie, and he's speaking right to my heart and my own anxieties and fears. And I feel heard and seen by that. And I think that's a beautiful gift of art. That's what art's supposed to do, I think, right? Make you feel things and make you feel related and understood, and you understand what they're putting down, you know?
Yeah, how someone else's creativity that could be something that is completely outside of reality, and yet it's so real that we connect to it in such a real way is amazing. Whether it's a painting, whether it's a film, whether it's a piece of written work, a piece of dance, that someone has taken their story and their understanding of something and put it into this other medium, and we can actually receive that, and it can feel so incredibly real to us that we can connect to the content and understand something in a deeper way. That's why we're doing this thing, right? That's why we're using all these different forms of media. That's not just about talking to each other, that we can actually use these other mediums to support our conversation, to find those points of contact, whether it's us analyzing videos and movies that we love, or a video game that we can appreciate, or something that we're seeing right now outside of our window that can connect us in a way to the theme that we're bringing in to the classroom.
I would even say that sometimes words are insufficient to convey some of these things. If I'm trying to convey a feeling to you, that's probably better off left to a piece of art than it is to words. I can only describe to you a feeling, but I can't make you feel it. But if I show you The Shining, maybe you can feel exactly what I'm feeling, or something close to it.
Yeah, amazing. So what we've done in this podcast is like taking a piece of media, a horror film for each of us, talking about our relationship to that film and how it's come up to this point from when we were children and our first encounter with it, and looking at that really within that lens of here and now. What is different between that when it happened, that beginning with that film, and what's changed? What have the transitions been? What has been the new set of the new knowledge that we've brought into our lives? Being more aware of ourselves, aware of our bodies, aware of the connections that we have with others and the support that we're looking for. That's really what we're looking at with this theme, and also in the other themes for this course as well. We're going to keep coming back to this idea of what's changed within the relationship with these themes and communicating with one another, and how it's changing right now as we're talking about it. More awareness, more understanding of things that may not have even occurred to me before, that you're helping in me thinking about and bringing into my awareness as well. So what else? What else do we want to chat about besides layering in some great stuff as we're doing this podcast to make it more entertaining, like that's possible?
I would like to, maybe if you could give me a better understanding or be a little more specific about what has changed. Like, why is Jaws more palatable or enjoyable for you today than it was then?
Right. So now why it's my favorite, like how can it be my favorite film if something that gave me such a fear response and resulted in so much fear moving forward and being afraid of the water, how could I possibly learn to love this video, this movie.
Yeah. What's wrong with you? How did this happen?
Why would I keep putting myself into this
Right.
situation and re-engaging with something that is so horrible? But it's not horrible at all. It's that as an adult now and being able to sit and watch this film and be able to, and you said it yourself, to be able to hit the pause button, like to feel that sense of control and choice, that if it feels like it's too much or it's not moving along fast enough or the scare isn't as much as I was hoping for, that I have the choice to stop it and re-engage with it when I'm ready. Because I do have that understanding. I do have a better understanding of who I am and what my limits are and what I'm looking for. And to be able to take those moments to pause and to check in with myself and to actually feel what's happening and to not actually be afraid of feeling. I think that's the real change that's happened for me from being a child and have so little control of what was happening around me, that now that I can actually understand the feelings and in my body and in my emotions, and to engage with those in a way that doesn't feel so scary for me anymore, that I'm actually curious and want to know more about myself.
That's beautiful.
I
That's
know,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah. That's like, well, because you can track your knowledge of yourself, your adulthood, your transition into being an adult through this one particular movie that it's developed and changed for you and means something different to you today than it did back then.
Yeah,
That's
a
really
shark,
cool.
a shark swimming around gobbling up people has helped me so much in understanding myself.
Yeah, and a
I'm-
movie.
I'm misty-eyed right now, just hearing my own words. It's incredible.
And for me, like a movie that caused me such anxiety and was like so tied to my fears of it as a child, and that I can appreciate it because it's a safe way for me to engage in those feelings of when I was scared as a child. I want to engage in that stuff in a safe way. I want to think about myself in the context of an adult and how much I've grown and developed. And so The Shining helps me to do that, to really recognize the changes that have occurred. And one of those changes is definitely that I feel connected to people, that I feel like I have a context. I have friends and family and people that care about me. And because of that, even if things don't go my way or things go wrong, I'll fundamentally be okay. It's not going to kill me. When that was not always how I interpreted fear. Sometimes I was so afraid that I thought that I would die. So to know that I'm safe, no matter what, I'm actually okay, is such a wonderful freedom. It's like magic.
Yeah, the loss isn't so big.
Yeah.
And horror movies also for me is such a wonderful way that through this medium that actually like induces this feeling of isolation and induces a feeling of being lost or forgotten, and any of these things that are such scary things for us as children and such scary things for us as adults, that the way that I can enjoy this so much is with other people and in a group or with an individual watching this thing. And also it's this lovely way of talking about a horror movie, talking about this thing, talking about these themes in this other thing that can seem like it's outside of our reality, but it actually is. That we've taken this wonderful outside experience and brought it into who we are and how we're understanding ourselves. Whether it's with Bruce the Shark or where it's with John the bad dad.
Here's Johnny.
That it's just a way for us to have a conversation about something that may not start as being such a personal place. It can start the conversation and realizing that the personal is so much part of us.
Yeah. So should we leave it there? I think we've said all we have to say about our favorite scary films.
I think so.
We'll have more to say in class.
Yeah, we'll always have more to say.
Yeah.
Considering neither of us ever saw ourselves as being the talkative type, we're doing a really good job.
Thank you. I think you're doing a good job. I'm okay. I'm disappointed that I didn't scare you in the beginning of the podcast. I was trying to scare you.
Well, you got lots more opportunities, so
Okay.
you can keep trying. So, thank you. you.